Yeah, I'm actually going to be looking for my job after I graduate. So I can, because you have to do the licensing hours after you graduate. So that's what's coming up next for me in June. Yeah.
But that's just bureaucracy. That's not...
Yeah, no. And actually, school with the practicum, the therapy.
All right, we should be good to go. Can you guys hear us out there? Perfect, thank you. Call the meeting to order at 6:31. Roll call. I guess I'll do that. Chris Riley. Here. Leanne Mankey.
Here.
D.G. Ramos.
Here.
Myself, Mr. Hinckley, Dave Nagel.
Here.
Kim Rada, she is excused. She emailed me earlier. All right. So that's good. Have any public comment this evening?
Hi, this is Diane Stam, and usually I wait to the end to make some public comments, but hopefully you're done in an hour, but if you're not, I have another meeting scheduled, so I'm going to have to drop off. And I think on your agenda, you're going to talk about some of these things, but I just kind of wanted to go through them and I'll be interested to hear the answers or what happens. One is, I know we've been talking about money approved for LARC and consideration of what we need immediately and what we may need a little bit longer if we go to referendum in 2026 instead of 2025. With that is also the question of what is, excuse the term, what is the appetite for going to the referendum in 2025 and 2026. I know in a lot of different meetings that I've been in, there's been some discussion and some, I'll call them mixed messages or conflicting ideas. So I'll be interested to hear what you think about that. And most recently, I was hearing of changes for the Permanent Building Committee, and I don't know where we line up from this committee to the Permanent Building Committee. I know there's, or I'm pretty sure there's a public hearing at May 13th at 6:30 to review the changes. And I know when this was all set up way back when, we met with town council at that point, and it was determined that due to the ownership of the library, the quasi-public private ownership, that there would be 2 voting members from the library board. And if I'm reading the documents correctly, it looks like there are now 2 voting members additional on each committee. And I don't know if I'm interpreting that correctly or not. Maybe people here know. If not, I think, being a part of the public hearing or getting those documents would be good. And if that's the case, I don't know if 2 is the right number for the library or if possibly 3. Because if they're getting 2 departmental representations for that Permanent Building Committee, then I think that we should have at least 1 departmental representative on there. I could be interpreting things wrong, just a thought or a question. And then the last point that I want to make is I know that our cost estimate is high in people's estimations. And I just want to say that while we were coming in looking at the $40 million number and we're not sure where that's going to land with everything that's going on, I wanted to just put out there on the record that Anna Reynolds had a similar knockdown and rebuild, only they only rebuilt 1 floor, not 2 floors. And their total cost was $35.5 million. So when people are looking to say, that's a ridiculous number, I don't think it really is. And of course, with the town hall, when that was done several years ago, it ended up being $32.3 million. So as much as I would like to buy a brand new, 2025 vehicle for the same price that I paid for a brand new vehicle back in the 80s, it's just not going to happen. So I think that, you have to think about these things. I know that you're looking to talk about presenting to town council again and things like that, but I just felt that I wanted to just say a few things about these items, make sure that they're on the agenda and they're discussed and taken into consideration. And that's the end of my public comments for before meeting. So thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. I think we'll cover some of those this evening, as you said. We have a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes, and it didn't go out in the packet, but,
I also move.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a review of the town council feedback presentation. I know we kind of went over it initially. Is there anything else that you want to go over and or review at this point? Or we want to move on to more exciting topics?
We can come back to that
We-
perhaps after.
Yeah, because I was gonna say there might be some, based off of the other discussions, we may come back to.
Okay, so I'm gonna just can I get a motion to just move this item down the agenda and we'll revisit it.
I'll make the motion to move it to the end.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the next item on the agenda is a review of the structural engineering assessment. So what I can say is the architect and firm has been retained. Lisa and I met with the gentleman last Friday, gave him a brief, and got some groundwork in, reviewing the upper floor and in the basement, all 3 floors there. So we took him on a quick tour on. He has what plans that we have available to give him to look at. As part of that was done with the 85 edition, where they showed some of the structural for the old building, and that he can utilize a portion of that. Currently, he's locating probe areas where we're gonna have to cut in, and so he can measure beams, joists, stuff like that, to make sure that it's gonna meet the requirement for the grant.
And
this is.
and I'm assuming he's gonna work with library staff so that.
Yep, Lisa and I have already met with him,
Oh,
and
okay.
we're going to, right now, I'm evaluating his initial 8 or 10 locations with facilities director Joe.
Okay,
Just, because we're gonna end up probably doing that work. So we're looking for maybe some to reduce it as much as we can, maybe find some alternate access points if we can do that, rather than just, cutting in hard wall, plaster and everything else and getting into the lathing and everything underneath. So that he did mark some locations last Friday. I have a map of them. Lisa's aware of it. I've given it to Joe. We've had some brief discussions, and he's gonna start looking at it more in depth in the next week or so.
Okay.
So we can plan on scheduling, staff, and the anticipation is to go in there and make those pilot holes prior to library opening, and then the structural guy can go in there and he can just do some measuring. He shouldn't do any kind of really disruptive stuff at that time, and then we'll have to schedule it to get those patched back up. So trying to do it all, and there's not too many holes, trying to get them all cut in one morning, perhaps, depending. That is the plan. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
I just wondered, and we'll get into this 2025 versus 2026. I'm wondering what the time frame is for the structural engineer.
So when we got him, he was anticipating getting us this information. I think I requested August 1st.
Okay.
So in anticipation of getting the grant in for this cycle.
Still on track for that, or?
As far as I know, we just have to, now it's really gonna be where these probes are gonna go and how much detail we're gonna get in there, because it's possible there could be some asbestos in there, and then we get into a whole different thing with remediation. So we're trying to look at that to avoid those areas, to go elsewhere if we can. So anticipation, yes. The way it was is he set up to come in, get that thing done, to get on the grant cycle this year.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see how that progresses. Do you have any input on that, Lisa? I know you were there. You had a brief conversation with him as well.
It's kind of what you just said, Eric, that there was a little bit of concern about where he had marked some of the areas, but they're looking for alternative access points. And some of it is the concern about the age of the building and possible asbestos. So Joe said he was going to look at it to see if there's other ways to get to the area that he needs to look at. But that was kind of the biggest concern Joe had about some of the areas that were marked.
Right.
Mhm.
There may be some other access points, whether they're like, if we already have some lights cut in some of those ceilings, maybe we can pull those out and he can get to what he needs or other things. So
Yeah, because one of the areas has a speaker in it. So it's a bigger area for him to maybe go up into.
So hopefully we can find that and at least get a few of them that way, and then maybe have him reassess some areas and maybe find some other areas where we can potentially go in, or he can go in and do what he needs to do.
Okay.
So that's the plan. So if you do see somebody poking around in there, that's probably who it is. And again, I'm scheduling with Lisa, so everything is gonna be, to not disrupt the library. Plan. All right, any other questions on that? Okay. Next item is review future funding and request to council. I've given you, if you're in the room, I've given you the breakdown of the account, the current balance. For the record, the balance as of April 14th was $8,426 in the account. We had already cut a PO for $7,300 for the architect for the structural, so that
It's already accounted for.
Yep, so that's
Okay.
already accounted for.
Okay.
So in discussions with the town manager, I understand that there was some funding that popped up. So I don't want to say popped up, but there's some funding they have. They're going to distribute between like the library, parks for the pool study, and maybe something with the firehouse. So there's an available pool of money.
Do we know how much that is?
I don't know how much that is right now, but his recommendation was, that we make a request to cover what we at least need right now for to get those revisions done, which I think was like 15,000 or something like that. And that, and if we add,
Well, I mean, the other thing too is, and this is like cart before the horse kind of thing. One of the things, jumping back to what the town council was looking for, they were looking for options.
Hmm.
And options require design changes, which requires not what is included in that 15,000.
I got you.
In addition, in talking within the facilities committee and doing some research, we potentially would be looking at a pre-construction manager, an OPM, to
Right.
help us move toward referendum, whether it's 25 or 26, we need that piece of it. And the cost estimating that we have in place is from a contractor provided by the architect.
Correct.
We have to look more at real world. Those pricings now are at least a year old. They were supposed to have estimated out. There are
Right.
various concerns with the current market and whatever about changes and things like that. So I think we have to build in not only the 15, but additional design changes with the architect, as well as potential construction management, pre-construction management or owner project management costs that would come before referendum. So personally, I mean, I've got to, that you're looking at the 139 number or the 130 that's been spent. The first 100,000 of it was LARC. That was funded for LARC. The previous were LARC wasn't in existence in 2011 and 2012.
Right.
And for those expenditures. And so the 2016 forward is what LARC has expended over a 10-year period. I think we've done pretty good with 100 grand. But I can't say that, 15 is the only number we need. We're going to need probably in the realm of minimally 60 or 70, I would think, because it's gonna cost 15 for the current design changes. Any other changes for them to go back and redraw, I have no guess on that, but
Right.
I'm looking at these figures and they're all in the realm of 15 and 20. And then you have the potential of a CM, OPM that are ranging probably in the realm of 30 to 50. When you take it all the way to referendum. So I don't know if it would be something that would be awarded, but I don't think it would be a bad number to shoot at 100. And I know that's a lot of money, but there are a lot of costs. If the council wants to see three different options, you have to pay the architect to put forward 3 different design options, not just work on one.
Understood.
So,
Yeah, because the original quote right now is, like Leanne was saying, was basically, the initial intention to get towards the original, I think the original presentation, which was, you know, the option that was there. And just, you know, supporting meetings and supporting stuff in between. So like Leanne was saying, that wasn't for any new designs. When we were looking at options, the only options that we had were, okay, our historical options of where we started and where we got to today. But if you're looking for today dollar options of, you know, different things, then that's, as I said, you know, I'm gonna need the expertise of the architect.
so since our last meeting, I went back and delved into the archives in my own history. And, yes, we started with, you'll see the Castle Booze, rendering in 2012. Actually, there was some done in 2010. That was not based on any feasibility studies. It was based on a request from Town Hall to at the time, library director, Marion. And she put together what we called a quick and dirty of what we needed. And it primarily was an addition out that way from the current building, not taking anything down.
Right.
And very little reconfiguration other than the upstairs and putting the community and children's room in that new addition. The stacks remained in place. I mean, all the things that we have now currently gone back and realized these are not going to work for a future library. That plan wouldn't work. So I hesitate to put it forward as an option because it really isn't one.
And that's
Yeah.
fair. And again, all the options are gonna come out of the building committee.
Right,
From the board of
right.
trustees. Again, what I was told is the money that they have, I don't believe it's a huge pot, and they are gonna try and fund a couple different things. So if we ask for 50 or 100 grand, that might be all that's in there. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the logic behind the number that I'm coming up with, and I could very well be off, because again,
Right,
I'm guessing.
So if, you know, please, anybody have input, you know, if we want to ask for 15 or 20 or something like that, at least to get us through this next hump, you know, and then see what's available, you know, because obviously the budget just got passed. You
Well,
know,
the concern I have, if say we say 20.
Mhm.
That's not going to address getting several options on the table from the architect.
It may not, yeah.
I don't know if 50 would get us the options, but I don't know that it would get us accurate estimates.
Is there a way to ask the architect what a cost of multiple options would be, so that at least when we're asking the council, we're saying, this is what they've said, and we're giving them the information, because then they might make the decision, okay, we're not looking for 3 options. We can only afford maybe 1 additional or 2 based on what they've said they would cost.
I mean, I think it's certainly possible to ask.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible, because they still have to come back and to remember, we want the options to include not necessarily the Taj Mahal, so to
Yeah.
speak, but you need it to address certain needs that have been identified. And that library board in this particular concept, one of the things that we've been saying right along is this is a concept. That might not be how it looks, but it
Yes.
includes everything we think we need. I think we can ask for variations on it. One of the things that Joe Salomon had brought up, there are some things in the design that I think can be revisited. Even within the current concept, that while they're very nice, they're not needs.
Mhm.
And those are the kind of things I think he can provide relatively easily. To come up with a whole new design is, I mean, I think we're back to when you get back to the earlier Andrew Berman items, we're probably talking in the realm of $30,000 to come up with a couple of other, and the more you put up options,
But is that the kind of thing we could just get pricing from them on? Like if we're just asking them to do a variation on what exists, removing some of the things that aren't needs, versus if we ask them to come up with another design based on what's being asked for now, just asking them what that cost is, because it sounds like that's what the board needs.
you mean utilizing the current facility as is?
No, I mean,
I think
What I'm-
he's saying, how much are you gonna charge me to do this kind of thing?
Oh, okay,
Because
yeah.
that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think-
Yeah.
we can ask.
yeah, because I'm thinking that might help with our ask to whomever's providing whatever funds.
They're going to need more specifics, because the more generalized you get, the more pie in the sky the cost is.
Yeah.
Let alone they're not knowing what we want,
Right.
so they're gonna need, whatever, they're gonna need more direction.
We're-
And I get the impression, whether we like it or not, that the council's looking for something that it isn't going to be as expensive as what we initially have presented. I'm just making that as a statement.
And I concur with the impression that I've gotten as well with the discussion I have. I will say that, what potentially could be done, because we are talking concept in the area versus it doesn't have to necessarily look like that. To maybe take away some of those things that were on the higher end in terms of what we could do. And we could also, what I probably would surmise, that the architect's gonna come back and say, okay, if we reduce the square footage, because that's your cost.
Yep, that's
Basically,
your-
it's where you're gonna reduce the square footage. What are we eliminating? And that's, because we're taking a whole, and what are we eliminating? If council is trying to get to, say, a $20 million number, I'll be honest with you, I don't think we should do anything, because you're not gonna build what we have for 20 million. But if the goal here is to potentially, like we could say to the architect, if we downsize by 5,000 square foot, what is our options? I also think it would behoove us to get those pre-construction involvements to get us more accurate pricing for our region as well as the current market.
So what I'm thinking is we have the tricked out Cadillac plan right now.
Yeah.
And like you said, with some of the discussions we've had between council and Joe, that could probably get tweaked as far as just some general costs. Okay, yeah, scrap the green roof, some of these other couple things.
Instead of the mass timber, you go back to a structural
Yeah,
steel.
so
that type of
then
thing.
you bump it that, so then you have a cost for the same size, and you have a cost that you reduce maybe to 40, 39, I don't know. And then I think from that plan, then they can work to scale it down, whether we cut the patio in half, the exterior one, cutting some of these things on maybe on the exterior, so you still keep some of that space in the interior, because you do have the great lawn area around there that you can still be utilized with,
Right.
with other things. Maybe I know Joe said he didn't want the tree there in the children's yard.
I think that was
yes,
just
and it does look very nice, but I absolutely agree.
I agree
think
with
that
him
tree,
completely.
That's just gonna, maybe that children's area just turns into where you can walk out on a patio that's maybe not walled, but or something. And then, as we've also briefly discussed too, is maybe just a breezeway to the old building instead of a full blown connection and stuff like that. These are just my thoughts, and and maybe if that number gets down, then you have the Cadillac plan. Here's what we presented before at 43. We took into consideration discussion at our presentation, and review with the facilities director, and we got it to X. And then we have this other option, whatever that is, from X,
Yeah.
we dial it back a little bit, whether it gets to, maybe 35 is the palatable number, I don't know. Just,
So,
Well, that said, if we do get if we get funding and we go to the architect and we try and get these options, whether it's, taking out the niceties, if you will, and then also potentially reducing various areas, square footage or outside areas or what have you. I can't see, because we're waiting on funding,
yeah.
that we're gonna have this kind of information for a May presentation. We can go to council and tell them we're doing this, but we don't have anything, we won't have anything to present.
Right, yeah, we're probably not gonna have anything to present until probably late summer, early fall, I would suspect.
Which then
That
brings
makes
us
us
to,
to-
we're talking twenty
Yeah,
twenty-six.
we just want to get the confirmation on that as well, so we know time frame we're working with.
I suspect, we can leave here tonight, we can get a motion and ask for a certain amount of money. And I'll give it to Lauren. You can draft something up and go to town manager and council. Whether they choose to accept or not, they may say, no, we're giving you X. And then-
Well, I would, that's why I would say I would ask for the whole enchilada and see what we get.
Yeah, and I don't know what, it's there, and I was told they are gonna fund, like three different committees out of there, so.
And if you have a referendum for the whole amount and it doesn't pass, it doesn't mean it's a dead issue.
Oh, no,
And
I
come back
absolutely,
With
and
revised version.
well, it's like all the work that's been done before. While it does look like, we've spent this much money since 2012. When, in the grand scheme of things, it's been done rather prudently, both by the board and by Lark, in terms of how we've spent it. We've tried to, but because of the length of time, you have feasibility studies that have to be redone because they're obsolete, that type of thing. So hopefully we won't go another 10 years, but, I've been at this a long time. I can keep plugging.
I think we're getting closer. I just don't know if, even if council gives us the money in May for the architect to revise the plans,
We can't do it.
in my heart of hearts, I don't think we're gonna make the 2025 agenda. And as Chris is aware, I think you got the ear on the.
Well,
the email chain
that,
with the
I,
town manager, right?
I was on the email chain with that, but also I'm just thinking in my head with what the town clerk had provided me as a draft for the referendum timeline. And it sounds like it'd be very tight for us. By the time we got the funding was in place, then we got the architect to come back with the options to start, being able to go down that process. I did want to add, as well, that the plan we put forth, the conceptual plan, it's not really like we threw out like all the bells and whistles and everything
No.
for it. It was basically,
This is
we
what-
told them, okay, maximize the space that we have, because we own,
Of course.
we own that land, maximize the space. And here's the things that, we feel we need. We need the flexibility of the rooms. We need, we were looking for the outdoor seating and the additional parking and that area and everything like that. So given the key features and everything like that. So it wasn't like, we went in and asked for, gold plated, windows or anything like that. So I want to make sure that impression kind of gets across, that it
Right.
was, trying to
already
maximize what we
scaled
had
down.
and
We're
scale to what we had.
approaching it from library innovation, taking it from the feasibility studies. We wanted to include it so that basically we were not obsolete 10 years out in terms of library
Right, yeah,
needs.
yeah.
And that's what we've approached. I think architecturally, we also, some of the things, and in defense of the architect, he listened to a whole group of people saying, let's be as environmentally sound as we can and all these things. So again, a lot of those things are wonderful, but they cost more.
Yeah.
So, those are the kind of things. If people wish to have them, we have to pay more to have the green roof and the mass timber roofing and that type of thing. So those are things that we can go back and revisit from the original concept that's currently drawn. Come back and see what we can do with the some of the options that we discussed here. But the one thing too, I wanted to throw about the grant, the way the grant works we need to keep working toward applying for the grant, but the timeline of the grant is, you have to be passed for referendum. So we can't apply this year anyway if we're not going to be at referendum, because they look at the list of what's passed at referendum at the beginning of November at a meeting on November 26th this year. And if we haven't passed for referendum, they're not going to consider us. So there's no point for us. I mean, we should still work toward having it accomplished in terms of the tasks, but there's no need to apply for it this year if we're going for 2026. The key is, if we're going for 2025, we can't wait to apply for the grant. It all has to follow that same timeline, the way the grant is with the state.
And many grants for whatever are like that.
Yeah,
For
which,
good or for
which
evil.
is kind of cart before the horse, but you know, that's what you need to do for them. So we have to follow it, because if, for example, it were to pass referendum in 2025, we cannot even start looking for RFPs or contracts or anything until they approve it, potentially at the governor's decisions when they decide to what they're going to bond in February. And then, so for 3 months, we're like stagnant to find out if we're going to get the grant. Then we could pursue.
So would someone like to make a motion to request a certain amount, and I can let Lauren know tomorrow, and she can move that forward. That's the.
I'll
The
make a
plan.
motion that we request $100,000 be funding Lark.
I'll second that.
Take what we can get.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Put that forward to Lauren.
Got to come back to the town council presentation.
That's what we're doing. We're circling back to the town council presentation. So,
Well, I did kind of touch on my thoughts about it. I think it's anticipated that we're going to have all this information for them, like pricing information and things like that. At least that maybe the perception has changed, but from what I've gathered, they're looking for more specifics than we're going to be able to provide without involving more consultants, whether it be architectural or construction manager or whatever.
if you'd like, I can craft a memo to council to just basically say, hey, we're working on this, and, in anticipation of getting some new funding, we will make a presentation.
Right.
And if we're going to formally push it to 2026, I can put that in there as well, if we think we're gonna do that, but if we don't.
Well, if there's no appetite for the council to support us in 2025, I think we would be foolhardy to try and push ourselves.
I agree, and I think, like Chris was on the email too, and I was copied on it as well,
I saw that, yeah.
where they said the leadership prefers 2026, so.
And if that's the case, I'm trying to look at glass half full. In the sense that it allows us more time to come up with potentially really tweaking this and making it the best possible package, both what we get for those dollars and bringing those dollars into a reasonable, acceptable realm. Also, from a marketing standpoint, we have to sell this, and we aren't selling it to the people who use the library as much as we're selling it to the people who don't. And we are competing against a number of economic concerns, whether it's the mill rate and a reval next year, the current tariff situation, which is throwing construction off tremendously. It may be a temporary thing, maybe it won't be. So who knows? So time would work in our favor. As I said, I'm trying to look at this half full. It also would allow us to potentially, go out there and educate the public about the needs of the library beyond those who utilize the library on a regular basis.
And going with that too, it also allows us more time, because I do understand that there are restrictions that may come into play when it does, get put on for referendum of what we can and cannot possibly, say. So I think giving us a little bit more time gives us a little bit more, we can mark it there and everything like that, so that then when we are, not able to say anything more, we've already kind of put the word out there and everything and have stuff in place for, other support to help promote that. And what Leanne was saying too is that it gives us more time. I've been trying to focus really on, okay, I've kind of looked at, okay, what tasks do we have in front of us in order to get, to a point where we have the polished presentation and get all the information that's needed and get get all the details behind everything. And so just, being able to, look at, okay, there's a lot of stuff we can kind of get done still now while we have this time. And then, that way, when it's the full court press with the stuff and everything like that, we basically have everything in place. It's just now hopefully just, going from there.
Well, there are things like for the grant, the structural engineering, we can pursue the SHPO letter. We can do all those things
Right, I mean, all that
now.
thing is
Those
getting
things
towards
are-
the grant anyway, so if
Yep.
we do happen to run into some problems with abatement or whatever, if we're, we're not on that tightrope of like, oh, well, we needed to have this yesterday and we're still behind the 8 ball.
Right.
So, like you said, maybe the time, I mean, certainly I think we can utilize it. Is that something that you guys would like me to do, draft a memo to council? Or do we just wanna wait on that? Cause I mean, I don't think we have to rush if we're gonna push it 26 to even try and present in the late summer. I mean, I think we can go.
Well, we, once we have more answers, because I
Right.
think they were looking for
Yeah.
more answers than we can provide right now.
I mean, I think.
I mean, is that,
Yeah, I mean-
Dave, you hear more than we do, and is that what you think they're
Maybe
looking?
you do. I more and more, to be quite honest, more and more, I find out I know less than people who are not on the council. Of course, it's my position where I happen to be, just realistically, I can understand that. I've heard no indication one way or another, the bulk of the council as to where their feelings in terms of moving this forth or not. I've heard it from other sources, which kind of surprises me because I'm on this committee and I'm hearing,
Yeah.
things that we have not discussed. And we've been more focused on the overall budget, and there were surprises. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I think your focus has been budget, so we haven't had a lot from feedback regarding the other.
So I have no idea. I brought it up at the last council
Well,
meeting.
I-
Surprises involving this and others, and the town manager had no idea what was going on either. So,
That's- You're trying to make me feel good, right?
well, I think I should know, even if it doesn't, even if I don't agree, I should at least have some input.
And I do want to let this committee know too, that, we've been, still pursuing, trying to get the information as much as we can, and everything like that. As I said, we reached a point where we need to pull in more, more expertise and more consultants, which is, where we got the discussion tonight. But I just want to let you know that it's been constantly trying to pull in what information we could find, like looking through all the old records of what the plans were, and basically just having the discussions to just try to pull together stuff. I mean, I was even looking at, okay, well, what information do we need for this presentation? Whenever it occurs in the future, what stuff that we would need, so that I know who we would have to pursue it after, so.
I do know the council generally, from what's been asked, and is looking for more specifics than you can provide. No matter what you do, it's just.
Yeah, like I said, I think that next time we go, we have the Cadillac version, this is what we presented to you in February. This is a version that we took into your comments and review with the facilities director.
And he had some very good
Right,
points.
and I said, and so this is this point, and then we have another one that we asked the architect to reduce some costs, and i.e. space.
And once again, the council is ultimately concerned with a number.
Well,
And
that-
there
I
are
guess
different ways of handling that, but it's basically they're looking for a number, because that's all they can do, to provide a number.
They can
To
provide
go
a
to
number, but
referendum, and all the public can do is to decide
Vote
whether
on
we
the
want to
number,
expend
yeah.
that much money or not. Obviously, you would give them
my,
information
my concern here is.
about
and
what it is.
Say we come up with option one and option two, which is scale down or a more concise version of what is currently offered, and then perhaps we come up with something that maybe is, and again, I hesitate to say it, it won't address the needs that we were asked to do. We were asked to project out as far as we could at what the library needs. If what we do is cut into that and take away space and flexibility and things like that, and available meeting space and all those things that came down the list of what was necessary, I am concerned, and maybe I'm a little jaded because I've watched too many referendums go through in our town, that they buy to the price tag, but they want to pay for the Buick, but they expect the Cadillac. And when the Cadillac doesn't come through, there's an upset. So one of the reasons that we've always been saying conceptual is because it may not look like that, particularly since I'm not quite sure how the incarnation will come out of. I'm still confused, to be honest, about whether Lark will be shepherding this, because I've heard that from a couple of counselors, that Lark would take this through building because it was grandfathered in, or we would be part of that permanent building committee, which, and I've heard from James different versions too. So I am, whatever they're changing the configuration, if they haven't given us an additional one, the library should have an additional one because of the ownership, because that's what was hammered out a few years ago when they first put it in place. But that aside, I'm not even sure if this body will be the body that shepherds it through.
So I can tell you, my understanding is.
It goes to.
Yeah, is-
I concur with what you're gonna say, which is that it goes to the permanent building committee. However, I've had too many other people tell me that's not the case.
Also on that point, to what Diane asked about earlier, my understanding is that the permanent building committee will contain two board members on that for the library project.
That's what was agreed to for the previous incarnation, and then every other department had one. Or
So-
none, or something like
So,
that,
but-
you know, so.
And so my understanding is we got the two. I don't believe that it's three, but I did
But we
not.
were supposed to have more than the other departments because we own the building.
And,
As,
and
as a,
maybe the library director's on it too. I
No, the
don't.
library director was on it as ad hoc anyway.
as a counselor, because of what's put forth for the review of the revised summary, I cannot say anything. I have opinions, but I can't say anything until afterwards.
But
So
what
I
are
would
they,
share with you
what
that,
are they
but I
proposing?
can't.
Oh,
I'm
you can't
bound.
share what's been
I'm bound.
proposed? Okay,
to
I didn't
not-
know if
to
the
not do so.
proposal was
So
out
I
there.
just wanted you and the public to know why I'm quiet right now.
No, I
even though-
get it. I just, is there a proposal out there that I can take a look at it? What's going to be
It was
discussed?
discussed at a prior meeting, right? Didn't they discuss the changes?
They discussed all the changes
All right,
and
I'll
what
have to
will
go
go
back
forward
and
there.
look at it.
There will be a public hearing on the revisions,
Another night out.
lack of revisions, and
And
then it
I believe
comes
there's a
back.
red line version of it that was presented as well.
Okay,
So
I'll have to
it'd
go
be-
and take a
It would be
look at
pretty
it.
easy to figure out what it was.
I've been
or what it
too
is.
immersed in this. to
and I'm
pay
just
attention to
holding my
that.
tongue. I want to say something, but I can't.
All right, but as I said, I know that your understanding, Eric, and what
Right,
you said, but I hear conflicting, and from people who seem to be in the know, so I'm a little confused.
Right.
Okay,
Read the revision,
There you go.
speak up at the public hearing.
I think it was presented 2 meetings ago, maybe? Can't remember. It should be on, if you go back on the town website, look at the town council meetings and just.
it
look
was
at the-
right in the council meeting. it was
Yeah, so just
reviewed.
look at the
Okay,
agenda and see
yeah,
which one
I'll
was
see where
on,
it
then
was.
just go
Okay,
into
I'll
the
go back and
minutes.
take a look.
Okay.
Oh, I have a whole box on that too.
All right, have we cleared the deck with everything there then for the moment?
I was hoping somebody would have a concise answer, but apparently not.
But I think we at least, it seemed like got more confirmation on.
Yeah.
On some of the other questions, so I think that helps.
Okay. So then moving on, do we have any other public comment if Diane Sloran would like to speak again? Don't know.
Thank you, Diane is still around. I was part of the early on discussions of the Public Building Committee. And I believe in the original rendition or the current rendition of the Public Building Committee, the Public Building Commissioners would make decisions. The board was given 2 voting rights because of our quasi-public private ownership. So the board, 2 board members or people appointed by the board to represent the board would also have a vote. My understanding was that while the department heads, in our case, the director, would not have a voting position, they certainly would be advisory ad hoc. When I quickly read through the new proposal, every department will have 2 voting members. And if that's the case, I don't feel that our board voting members cover that. I think that if you're going to have somebody from a department represent and have a board, then we should also have department folks representing. So I think it's very important for us to go back and read exactly what it says in that agenda for what happens and what doesn't happen. But I was a part of those discussions when it was, how are we going to do things? And the other key point in all of those discussions were we want to keep an odd number because it's very hard. What happens if you get a 4-4 vote? You can't go anywhere. So that was the thought. So I believe that the public hearing is on May 13th at 6:30. So that I think that's Tuesday and before the town council meeting. So I think it would behoove all of us to read through that and see, in fact, what's happening. And then, again, I just want to emphasize that it was not a Taj Mahal or Cadillac design. There were some innovative features in there that maybe we can cut back on. Certainly a sustainable roof can go back, you can go back for that. But if you are designing to a price, you are giving up and walking away from the objective, which was to, after 30 years, build an expansion, given the space that we had, the needs of our community, and what's available to us, and the lessons that we've learned, in the past. So I understand and can agree with, we need to look at this conceptual design and see where it can go lower. I think with the climate that the price is going to go up, even if we gave up square footage, which I would not recommend at this point. Maybe there's something else, as you say, the outdoor areas or something that can be done over time, be finished out, but it's got to be planed. I don't know where and when it makes sense to, save the cost on that, so again, I'm not against trying to do that. It's not anything that's going to be ready by May. And to pay an architect to come out to talk about a conceptual plan that folks are already having difficulty getting behind simply because of the price tag, I don't think does us any good. I think if what town council is looking for is options, we've got to have options. But again, to the point with the LARC funding, that you've got to have an architect do it. I can't give it to you. So that's where we're coming from. And I appreciate all the discussion folks have had here. I think you're dealing with a moving target. And I'm excited that the structural engineering assessment is going forward because, we can't apply for the credits, the grant without that. And that grant and that grant time, my understanding is that grant is like $1 million. So I don't.
Up to $2 million.
Sorry?
It's up to $2 million.
2 million. Okay.
So
So
my understanding is it's up to 2 million. I've seen historically a lot of places, the max I've seen is $1 million. So I think it's between.
So that does not a library build, right? So what we would still go forward, going out for RFPs, I would imagine, on a new design and trying to get whatever other funding we could get and move through. Having that approved doesn't stop the whole process if it's been approved in referendum. So I don't think we have a stopgap while they review the applications for the grant. Again,
Actually,
that's,
we can't contract with anyone when we can't do because they have to approve the RFPs that go out. So it does put us in a holding pattern.
we would have to have that RFP to go out. They'd have to approve it. We have to have it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we
Right.
can prep it, but we can't send it, do any kind of action until it's been decided at the bond council by the governor.
Okay. So, lucky for you folks, that's all I have time for tonight. But again, thank you. Again, I think you're doing a great job. I think you've got the library and the community, up in the front of your mind in your discussions here. And, to me, that's just so important. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Online? Okay. Any other comments before we close?
Just getting something that Diane said, I didn't mean to imply that this was, we went for the Cadillac. What we did was ask for innovation.
Right.
From library aspects, and also to include those aspects that people had referred to, like the environmentally friendly aspects. We tried to be reasonable. There were some requests that were quite interesting, like telescopes and other assorted things that just weren't even part of the
Those are the whole
consideration.
planetarium.
So, I mean, I don't want to say that, we shot for the moon and put it all in there, because it's not all in there. So we'll see. Perhaps one of the things we can discuss with the architect is not just taking pieces out, as Diane said, because, but to take what we identified as needs and an entirely different design, which is a possibility too.
Reallocate some space perhaps.
Right,
and
right.
just,
But
work
this
within-
is what we have identified that we need to have, and perhaps a new drawing, but there will be a cost associated with that.
And I think going forward to the next presentation, I mean, to your point, you want to be able to tell council, look, we're here with this design because we don't want to be back in front of you again in 10 years.
Right.
We don't
That's
want to
a good-
bother you anymore.
That's actually a good, when we're talking about marketing to the people who don't use the library, it's also good in our prep stuff that part of what's being presented is a library that can last another 30 years, as opposed to, hey, we do something now and 5 years down the line, we're asking for another referendum because it's not working in the modern era.
Especially if we hit demographically, we hit younger people and couples that maybe have very young children. It's like, hey, we want your child to be able to go all the way through the library system and be able to utilize it and, not have to worry about it.
The other thing that we've tried to do is trying to, in terms of a marketing aspect, is to educate the public, the relationship between the library and the Board of Education. We have a very good one. Also with the senior center. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like we're working with, our own little world.
right.
It's to the whole community, but also within other town departments that we work with. So we have, I mean, again, glass half full, marketing aspect, we can start developing these things.
I think one other thing is for your real estate folks is having a library that is cutting edge for people who are looking to have folks buy in property value. That I could see being a great marketing component to people who are like, I don't use the library. Okay, but if you want to sell your home, they buy here or they buy in another town nearby that has a more modern library because they can get something similar.
And that is one of the things that would be working with a pre-construction manager and OPM.
If that's it, if I can get a.
I move to end this. For tonight. I move to close the meeting for tonight,
All
sorry.
right. Second, thank you. All right, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Is there a place to like recycle this or?